Welcome to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. If this is your first time visiting the channel, feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And now just relax, get comfortable, listen to tonight's horror stories. My name is Bennett. Back when I was a sophomore in college, I worked as a delivery driver for Domino's Pizza. To be honest, I hated the job, but I stuck with it because the extra cash was great, especially on days when the weather was terrible. One night, a massive blizzard hit. The wind was howling through every crack in the door, and the snow was falling so hard that you could only see a few feet in front of you. I really should have stayed home, but a big order came in for a remote area on the edge of town. Being a broke college student, my greed got the better of me. I told myself, in this kind of weather, the tip is going to be huge. I tossed the heat bag onto the passenger seat and pulled out of the lot. The drive was a nightmare. Visibility was basically zero, and my windshield wipers were struggling to keep up with the heavy snow. Finally, after a stressful battle with the steering wheel through the whiteout, I arrived. The house was a gray, wooden building that looked shaky and ancient. A dim yellow light flickered from the window. The driveway was buried under at least 10 inches of fresh snow. It hadn't been shoveled at all. I should have parked on the street and walked in, but I didn't want to trudge through the deep snow. I drove my Bronco right into the yard to get closer to the house. I planned to pull a U-turn so I could face the street when I left, but I completely misjudged the space. The path was narrower than it looked. When I backed up, my rear passenger tire slid off the solid ground and dropped right into a drainage ditch hidden by the snow. Annoyed, I grabbed the pizza and got out, thinking I'd deal with the truck after the delivery. I knocked on the door. An older man answered. He looked strange, with greasy matted hair and messy clothes. He stared at me, glanced over at my stuck truck, and gave a creepy little smirk. He handed me some cash, took the pizza, and shut the door without saying a word. I went back to my truck and tried to shift into 4 low to pull out, but it was useless. The tires just spun on the frozen slush. Just then, the man opened his door and yelled out to me, "I already called a tow truck. Why don't you come inside and call your shop to let them know why you're late?" Even though my gut told me not to go into a stranger's house. The bone-chilling cold was starting to soak through my clothes. I also didn't want to waste gas idling the engine while I was stuck. Eventually, I agreed and stepped inside. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the smell of mold and thick dust hit me. It was hard to breathe. The inside was a total disaster, like a hoarder lived there. Piles of junk were stacked everywhere, and trash was scattered all over the floor. It didn't feel like a home at all. The man pointed toward a landline phone in the dining room. "Use that one," he said. I picked up the receiver and pressed it to my ear. There was nothing, not even a dial tone. The line was completely dead. I hit the hook over and over, but it was useless. I froze for a few seconds as a cold shiver ran down my spine. When I looked back toward the living room, I jumped. He was standing perfectly still in the doorway, staring at me without blinking. In that moment, I realized I wasn't a guest. I was trapped. I put the phone down and tried to stay calm as I walked back toward him, my eyes darting around for anything I could use as a weapon. At that point, the man showed his true colors. "You know what this is," he growled. "How much cash do you have on you?" I started begging. I told him I only had the money he just gave me, and about $20 of my own. I told him to take it all and just let me go. He shook his head. I think you've got more than that. Don't make me hurt you. In that do or die moment, as he stepped toward me, I spotted a heavy wooden broom leaning in the corner. Without thinking, I snatched it up and swung the handle with every bit of strength I had, smashing it right into his face. I heard a sickening crack. He stumbled back, clutching his face and screaming curses at me. I didn't wait a single second. I bolted for the back door and lunged out into the snow. I ran like a madman around to the front of the house, trying to find my way back to the main road. Behind me, I heard him shouting, but he didn't follow. He probably figured I wouldn't get far in the middle of a blizzard. Luckily, after running for a while, a snowplow came down the road. I waved my arms like crazy, and the driver stopped. After I told him about the robbery and my truck, he let me in and called the police. About 40 minutes later, the police took me back to that house. To my shock, the front door was wide open, and the house was completely silent. No one was there. The cops said there were clear signs of a struggle. The broom I used was still on the floor, a chair was knocked over, and there was a small trail of blood leading out the door. But the man was gone. The pizza and wings were still sitting on the coffee table. The truth was, that man didn't even live there. He had found an abandoned, trash-filled house and used it as a trap to lure delivery drivers on blizzard nights. He used the bad weather to get cars stuck so he could rob the drivers easily. If I hadn't fought back, he probably wouldn't have stopped at just taking my money. After my truck was towed out, I returned the money to the shop and quit on the spot. I looked at my manager and said, "If anyone wants pizza in a blizzard, they can go hungry. I'm not risking my life ever again." That was a huge lesson for me. I realized that no tip is worth your safety. Sometimes, knowing when to say no is the only thing that keeps you alive. My name is Alicia. I'm 20 years old and currently a third-year communications student in Oklahoma. The road I took to get here was far from normal. 5 years ago, I witnessed hell inside my own home, and the person who created that hell was my father. Things weren't always bad. I still remember the days before my dad joined the military. He used to be warm and kind, but after he returned from Afghanistan in 2016, he was a completely different man. The change was slow, but terrifying. It started with small bursts of anger and screaming for no reason. Then, he started installing cameras everywhere. In the living room, the kitchen, the hallways, and even the bedrooms. Every move we made, and every word we said, was recorded. My mom tried to endure it. She thought it was just PTSD from the war, and believed things would go back to the way they were. But the real nightmare began in 2020. It started over something as small as a window curtain. My mom closed the curtain because the afternoon sun was too bright. My dad suddenly snapped. He screamed that she was trying to hide something and accused her of having an affair. After that day, things got worse than I could have ever imagined. His anger wasn't just words anymore. He took it out on my mom every single day, and the violence became more severe. He used guns, belts, and once even a metal flagpole. And he forced my two siblings and me to stand there and watch. I was 15, my brother was 12, and my little sister was only 7. We huddled in the corner of the room, shaking with fear and trying not to cry out loud. My brother was so scared, he closed his eyes and covered his ears. But my dad wouldn't let him. He forced him to look. We were too young to understand much, but we knew that fear would stay with us forever. After every outburst, the house would fall into a deadly silence. My father, with a terrifyingly calm face, would order me to clean up the battlefield. I had to pick up broken glass from the floor and wipe away dried blood. Then, he made me bathe my mother. I remember exactly how my hands shook as I washed my mother, who no longer had the strength to move. She looked at me and cried. Her lips moved, but no words came out. I knew she wanted to say something, but she couldn't. I bathed her while biting my lip as hard as I could to keep from sobbing. Those 48 hours felt like an endless nightmare. Finally, my mom couldn't take it anymore. Her body was too broken from the constant injuries. She passed away, right there in the house, in front of our eyes. When she died, my father showed no regret. He immediately started thinking of ways to hide it. He called us together and forced us to memorize a lie, that she had an accident, an overdose, or anything that sounded believable. He told us that when we called 911, we had to say exactly what he told us. He said if anyone told the truth, he wouldn't let them go. But he forgot one thing. The very cameras he installed to control us became the clearest evidence against him. Every single act of violence had been recorded, second by second. When the police arrived after the death report, they noticed something was wrong immediately. We were acting terrified, avoiding eye contact, and our stories didn't match the scene. The police asked more questions and watched our reactions closely. It didn't take long for them to find the camera system. When the first video was played, they didn't need any more statements. The evidence was undeniable. My father was arrested right away, but the legal journey wasn't easy. The case lasted 5 years with a long string of trials, hearings, and depositions. I had to tell that horrific story over and over again. But I kept going for my mother, thinking about the pain she had to endure. There were nights I couldn't sleep, because as soon as I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's final moments. Finally, in October 2025, it all came to an end. My father pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. The judge sentenced him to 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The case is over, but the trauma stays with my siblings and me. However, our lives have to go on, even if it isn't easy. Now I am majoring in communications. I'm doing it not just because I love it, but because it was the dream my mother had for me. I still think about her often, especially when I'm alone. There are memories I want to forget, but can't. And honestly, I don't want to forget. Even though it's in the past, the pain is still there. It doesn't suffocate me like it used to, but it's a part of who I am. I'm learning to live with it. I never thought I would get through this, but the 3 of us grew up anyway. I don't hate my father. Instead of holding on to bitterness, I choose to remember the time when he was actually a good dad. Even though my story started with pain, I don't want it to end there. I hope that one day, when I tell this story, I won't see myself as a victim anymore. I want to be proof of survival and courage. If my story can help someone else walk out of their own darkness, then everything I went through wasn't for nothing. The true story. This narrative is inspired by the real-life case of Alicia Brown. At 15, she witnessed a family tragedy when her father, Joshua Brown, became violent after returning from Afghanistan. In 2020, fueled by irrational jealousy, he tortured his wife for 48 hours and forced his children, including Alicia, to clean the scene. After the victim died, he tried to cover up the crime, but was caught because of the camera system he installed to monitor the family. In 2025, Joshua pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and received 4 life sentences. Alicia is currently a communication student, living out her mother's dreams. My name is Carrie. When I was a kid, a babysitter would often watch me. She was the daughter of one of my dad's coworkers. At the time, I really disliked her. She was a terrible babysitter. I had other babysitters that I liked, so I knew how bad she was. She didn't seem to want to do the job at all. She was always overly strict with me, only caring about following my parents' rules. I was used to having to yell out and announce that I was coming downstairs whenever I wanted to get a glass of water after bedtime. I didn't even dare to turn on my nightlight because she required me to sleep with my door open so she could easily check on me at any time. However, one night when she came over, she seemed different. I remember my parents told her that it was okay to go home if she wasn't feeling well. She refused, just saying that she was a little tired and would take a nap after she got me to bed. And indeed, she looked very tired. She was dozing off while I was eating dinner. To be honest, her carelessness made me much more comfortable than usual. I thought that if she was like this every time she watched me in the future, I wouldn't have to be afraid every time she came over. She even forgot to get me to bed on time, so I had an extra 45 minutes of TV time while she dozed off on the sofa. Her hand was even in the position of scrolling on her phone. That made me laugh with delight. She finally woke up and told me to go to bed. It was strange that she didn't show any annoyance when she saw me bending the rules. A few hours later, I woke up and was very thirsty. I poked my head into the hallway and started to call for her. I asked for permission to go downstairs to get a glass of water, as we had agreed. But for the first time, I didn't hear an answer. There were no familiar lines like, "Oh my God, what do you want now?" or "Go back to sleep, kid." Nothing, except for the buzzing of the TV downstairs. I thought it was strange. I thought something was wrong. So, I decided to go downstairs to look for her without permission. I saw that the bathroom door was closed and the light was on. That told me she was in there. I stood in front of the bathroom door for a few seconds. I was really worried about getting in trouble for being downstairs after bedtime. But then, I suddenly remembered that she hadn't been feeling well since she arrived. I thought maybe something had happened to her. I knocked on the door and called her name again. To my surprise, the door was unlocked. It's very strange to go to the bathroom without locking the door, right? I knew something was wrong. So, I pushed the door open. She was sitting there near the toilet. The toilet lid was down. She was leaning against the wall with something sticking out of her arm. I didn't know what it was until I was older. At the time, I didn't know anything about drugs. And there was a syringe in her arm. So I thought she was sleeping and didn't want to wake her up. I just got my glass of water and went back to bed to continue sleeping. The next thing I knew, I was woken up by my mom's scream the next morning. The rest of the event is a blur to me. Flashing blue and red lights outside, phone calls and crying. My parents seemed to try to forget the whole thing. They never hired another babysitter. It wasn't until later that I learned they acted that way to hide something. So I wouldn't realize that my silence and lack of intervention had contributed to her death. It's been 10 years. Now that I look back, I can clearly see everything. All of the rules my babysitter made were a perfect plan. Me yelling out before I went downstairs was like an alarm for her to quickly stop whatever she was doing. But that night, if I had called my parents or done anything to get help, maybe she would still be alive. My name is Gail, and I was 12 years old when this happened. Summer in our small Arizona town was always hot and quiet. My parents worked all day, leaving my 6-year-old sister Emma and me at home. Our single-story wooden house sat at the end of a long driveway, surrounded by tall oak trees. That day, it was around 2 p.m. Emma was lying on the living room rug, watching cartoons, while I sat at the kitchen table doing my homework. Our dog, Lucky, was sleeping by the back door, tongue lolling out from the heat. A loud banging at the front door startled me. It wasn't a polite knock, but heavy thumps. Emma turned her head to look at me. "Sarah, someone's at the door." I stopped my homework and walked into the living room. Through the window beside the front door, I saw a strange man standing outside, staring at us. His face and attire were so contrasting that I still remember them clearly. He was dressed neatly, but his face was covered in a thick, bushy beard. He held a pink briefcase with Mickey Mouse on it, which looked very eye-catching. When he saw me looking intently, the man smiled, pointing at the briefcase in his hand. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, partly because of its bright color, partly because I kept wondering, why would a grown man carry a child's briefcase? I didn't open the door. Mom had told us never to open the door for strangers when no adults were home. The man continued to wave, smiling. He pointed to the briefcase, then pointed to the door, as if to say he had something for us. "Sarah, what does he want?" Emma came over to me, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Stay away from the door." I pulled my sister back, my eyes still fixed on the outside. The man stood there for a few more minutes, then suddenly turned away. I thought he was leaving, but no. He walked along the side path of the house, heading towards the back. My heart pounded. I ran into the kitchen, looking through the back window. The man had reached the back door, standing right outside the wooden steps. He placed the briefcase on the ground, then grabbed the doorknob. Lucky sprang up, fur bristling, barking loudly. The doorknob was violently rattled. The door shook, but luckily, Mom always locked it securely whenever she left. The man stopped, looking into the house through the back door's glass. His eyes met mine. He smiled, then gestured with his hand for me to open the door. "No." I shook my head hard. He continued to gesture, this time more urgently. Why did he want to enter our house? Why wasn't he saying anything? Emma ran to me, clutching my arm tightly. "Sarah, I'm scared." Lucky barked incessantly, constantly lunging towards the back door. The man didn't seem afraid or annoyed by the barking. He just stood there, patiently gesturing for me to open the door. I ran to the landline phone in the living room. With the mind of a 12-year-old, I wondered whether to call Mom or the police first. Suddenly, Emma burst into loud sobs. I couldn't even make the call. I quickly dropped the phone and ran to my sister. I hugged her, trying to comfort her. Looking back at the man, he had pressed his face against the door, his smile wider now, his hand still waving. I tried to make my voice loud and clear. "I've already called the police. They're on their way." Through the glass, I saw the man stop gesturing. He tilted his head, as if listening. Then he gave a chilling laugh, as if he knew I was lying. He continued to stand there looking into the house with patient eyes, as if he could wait all day. Suddenly, I remembered. Grandma was on her way to visit us. She would be here around 3 p.m. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2:45 p.m. I quickly pulled Emma back into the living room to call Grandma. My voice trembled as I told her about the strange man. "Listen carefully. You and Emma run to the back bedroom right now. Lock the door, and Grandma will be there soon." I did exactly as she said. We ran into Mom and Dad's bedroom in the back of the house, and I locked the door. Emma crawled onto the bed, while I sat close to the door, listening. Lucky was still barking, but now the barks were less frequent. 5 minutes stretched like an eternity. Finally, I heard the engine of Grandma's car. The car door slammed shut. Footsteps on the pathway. "Sarah! Emma!" Grandma's voice echoed from the front. I opened the bedroom door, ran out, and hugged her tightly, crying loudly. Grandma kept asking if my sister and I were okay, and she checked to see if either of us was hurt. She quickly ushered us inside, locked the door, and called the police. My parents also rushed home. There were no signs that he had tried to break in. The back doorknob wasn't damaged. There were no footprints in the soft earth under the windows. The police concluded the man likely had mental health issues. The man never returned. It's been 11 years since that day, and I still vividly remember his smile. And I still wonder, what was in that pink briefcase? Why did he want to enter our house? Some questions never get answers. I'm Katie, 14, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, with my sister Elise, who's 15. It was a Friday, late July, and the heat was absolutely brutal. Mom was working the afternoon shift at the hospital. Dad was off on some business trip, so it was just me and Elise holding down the fort. "Hey Katie, want to go snag a free Slurpee?" Elise called out from the living room. 7-Eleven is running promos today. I rolled out of bed and slid into my sandals, jean shorts, and a pink tank top. Plenty for this kind of weather. Elise was already waiting by the door, keys in hand. The 7-Eleven was just a couple blocks from our house, like a 10-minute walk, tops. Phoenix streets were dead quiet in the afternoon. "Don't go overboard with the snacks," Elise warned as we stepped into the store. The little bell above the door jingled, and the blast of cold AC felt like heaven. The guy behind the counter gave us a nod. We knew him pretty well from all the candy runs. I made a beeline for the Slurpee machine, grabbed a medium cup, and went all in on strawberry. Elise filled up a large one, mixing cherry and blueberry. While she was still messing with the lid, I drifted over to the snack aisle. Bright orange Doritos bags jumped out at me from the shelf, right next to rows of Haribo gummies and stacks of Hershey bars. I was doing some quick math in my head, figuring out if I had enough change for another pack of M&Ms, when a voice suddenly came from right next to me. "Hey there, pretty girl." I turned around. There was a woman standing nearby, brown hair pulled back, wearing a white blouse. In her arms was a little dog, kind of fawn-colored, panting like crazy. "Hey," I said, trying to be polite. "Do you like dogs? His name's Peanut," she said, holding him out to me. Peanut licked his nose and stuck his tongue out, looking up at me with those big round eyes. "Aw, yeah, he's adorable," I said, reaching out to pet his head. His fur was super soft and warm. "What's your name?" she asked. "Katie." "Katie, could you do me a quick favor? I really need to use the bathroom, but they don't let dogs in the store. Would you mind watching Peanut for a minute, just right outside?" I glanced over at Elise. She was still by the Slurpee machine, back turned, totally focused. "Sure, I can do that," I nodded. "Thank you so much. I'll be fast." She handed me Peanut. He was lighter than I thought, maybe 3 pounds, tops. We stepped outside. I realized I never asked her name. The sun was still beating down, hot as ever. I stood under the awning in the shade, gently stroking Peanut's fur. The dog just lay there quietly in my arms. "Katie, come here for a sec," the woman called out from near the parking lot. I blinked. Wait, when did she come outside? She was standing next to a blue van, side door wide open. There was a tall guy standing beside her. "Come here, Katie. I want to show you something," she said, waving me over. I started walking toward the parking lot, still holding Peanut tight. But the second I got close to the van, the guy grabbed my left arm. "Get in the car," he snapped. His voice was rough. His hand clamped down on my arm, huge, calloused fingers digging into my skin. I gasped and dropped Peanut. The little dog bolted. I tried to yank my arm away, but he was way stronger than me. "No, let me go," I screamed. "I said get in the car." He started dragging me toward the open van. Inside, I saw a nasty gray carpet and rope. "Katie, let go of my sister." Elise's voice cut through the air like a whip. She came running out of the store, her Slurpee flying out of her hand and exploding on the pavement, ice and soda everywhere. "Help! He's trying to kidnap her!" she screamed. The clerk came running out of the store, another guy right behind him. Over by the gas pumps, someone jumped out of a red car. The man let go of me instantly. I dropped to the ground, scraping both my knees on the pavement. "Let's go," the woman shouted. They both dove into the car. The engine roared to life. It backed out fast, tires screeching as it tore down the street. I caught a glimpse of the license plate, Arizona, and the numbers 736, but I couldn't remember the exact order. Elise threw her arms around me. I was shaking all over, heart pounding like crazy. The clerk pulled out his phone and called 911. "You okay?" he asked, his face full of worry. I couldn't answer. My knees were stinging and bleeding, and I felt completely out of it. Elise didn't say anything either. She just kept holding on to me, breathing fast. About 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers took our statements. They asked me to describe the guy, the woman, and the car. They said it looked like a planned kidnapping. Mom showed up not long after Elise called her. She hugged us tight and cried. Dad booked the earliest flight back to Phoenix. That night at dinner, I still couldn't stop shaking. I kept seeing the guy's cold eyes and feeling his hand crushing my arm. Elise sat beside me, holding my hand the whole time. "From now on," Mom said, "you girls do not go anywhere alone, and you always tell us where you're going." I nodded. I got it now. The world wasn't as safe as I'd thought. The next morning, the 7-Eleven clerk called my mom. He'd found Peanut wandering near the store, hungry, thirsty, and totally lost. Poor little guy. He'd been part of their plan, and they didn't even care what happened to him. "Can we keep him, Mom?" I asked, while she was telling us about the call. Mom looked at Dad, then Elise. "If no one comes forward after a week, we'll make it official," she said. A week passed. No one called. No one claimed him. The police checked. Peanut didn't have a chip. They said he was probably just used as bait, so we adopted him. Just like that, Peanut became part of our family. Now every night when I cuddle Peanut close, I think about how one good thing came out of that awful day. This little dog got a new home, and I got a little buddy who'll always remind me just how lucky I was to get away. To this day, every time I hear the familiar rumble of a lawnmower, my heart starts pounding like I'm 14 again. I'll probably never forget the words Dave said. My name is Hannah, and this happened 9 years ago. My family lived in a small, one-story white house in Findlay, Ohio. My mom worked at the local pharmacy on Main Street. She was a kind lady who everyone in town knew. My dad was an electrician. He was pretty busy, but he always made time for his music. Dave first showed up at the pharmacy where my mom worked. He was there to pick up his medicine. He was a guy in his 70s with a big belly and a shiny bald head. He only had a few gray whiskers on his chin. Dave came into the pharmacy every week for his heart and blood pressure pills. What bothered me was the way he always looked at my mom. His eyes were always on her as she worked. Dave would try to make their conversations last longer. He'd ask about the weather, her family, and anything else he could think of just to talk to her for a few extra minutes. My mom was always polite, but I could see the annoyance in her eyes every time Dave showed up. After becoming a regular customer, Dave started asking my mom out for coffee. My mom would politely refuse. She'd hold up her left hand to show him her wedding ring. But Dave didn't give up. He kept asking her out, to dinner, to the movies, and even for a walk in the park. Each time she said no, his face would get a little darker, but he'd still give a forced smile. About 2 months later, Dave started showing up at our house. The first time, he drove his lawnmower right onto our front lawn. He said he wanted to help us cut our grass for free. My dad politely said no and told him we could do it ourselves. But Dave kept coming back, once a week, then twice, then 3 times. Dave also found out that my dad played guitar in a local country band. He begged to join the band, saying he could play the harmonica. My dad gently turned him down, explaining that they didn't need another instrument player. But Dave kept asking, and he even brought his harmonica to our house to prove he was good. I started to feel uneasy. Whenever Dave showed up, the mood in our house became tense. My parents tried to stay calm, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They started locking the doors, even when we were home, and my mom always made sure I wasn't home alone for too long. One day, my mom was working an afternoon shift at the pharmacy. My dad was at band practice outside of town. I was home alone, sitting in the living room playing Super Mario Bros. On my Nintendo. The music from the game filled the quiet house. Around 3 in the afternoon, I heard the familiar sound of a lawnmower outside. I turned the TV volume down and went to the living room window to look outside. Dave's lawnmower was parked right in front of our house. Dave turned off the mower and got off. I could see him holding something in his hand. From that distance, I couldn't tell what it was, but it was long and had a metallic gleam from the sun. I ran to my bedroom and closed the door right away. I heard him try to turn the doorknob of the front door. It was locked, but Dave didn't give up. He knocked on the door and shouted, "Is anyone home?" "I see the TV is on." I didn't answer, hoping he would think someone just forgot to turn off the TV and leave. But Dave kept knocking, and the sound got louder and louder. I opened my closet and climbed inside. I pulled the closet door shut. I took out my phone and texted my dad. "Dad, come home! Dave is here and I'm really scared." The knocking stopped, and for a few minutes I didn't hear anything. I started to hope that Dave had left. But then another sound made my blood run cold. It was the sound of the kitchen window being pushed open. The sound from that window was very specific because of its rusty hinge. The kitchen window was always left slightly open to let some air in, and we never thought anyone would climb through it. I heard Dave groan as he tried to squeeze through the window frame, then a loud thud as he fell onto the floor. I sat in the closet and tried to breathe as quietly as I could. Through the crack in the closet door, I could hear Dave walking around in the living room. He moved slowly, and I heard a dull thud as something fell onto the wooden floor. Then I heard a dragging sound, like Dave was pulling something heavy across the floor. The sound got closer and closer, heading toward my room. I gripped my phone tightly, my hands shaking as I typed another text to my dad. "I'm hiding in the closet. He's in the house." The footsteps stopped right in front of my bedroom door. Dave was standing there, breathing heavily. After a few seconds that felt like a lifetime, his footsteps started to move away and went back to the living room. He climbed back out the window, and I heard the lawnmower engine start up. I still didn't dare to get out of the closet. 10 minutes later, I heard a car screech into our driveway. The car door slammed, and I heard my dad running into the house. "Hannah, where are you?" I got out of the closet with shaky legs and ran to him. He hugged me tightly, then looked around. There were muddy shoe prints on the wooden floor. My dad led me to the backyard to check if Dave was really gone, but he was still there. He was standing under a large oak tree in the corner of the yard, piling up small sticks at its base. In his hand was a huge fire axe with a sharp blade. My dad called out to Dave, trying to keep his voice calm. "Did you just go into my house?" Dave turned to look at us. His face was completely blank, as if he didn't recognize my dad. Then he said in a strange, flat voice, "Rat in the closet, going to burn the fire." He repeated the phrase 3 times. His eyes were on me when he said the word rat, and I knew he knew I had been hiding in the closet. My dad pulled me back into the house, locked the door, and called the police. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes and found Dave still standing at the tree with the axe. He didn't fight back when they approached him. When they asked him about going into our house, Dave just looked at them with a blank stare and repeated, "Rat in the closet, going to burn the fire." The police took Dave in for questioning, but they found out he had early-stage dementia. The doctor explained that at his age, his brain had declined significantly. They believed he didn't understand that his actions were wrong and that he thought it was normal to go into someone else's house. Dave couldn't explain why he wanted to burn a fire or why he called me a rat. He was moved to a nursing home in Toledo where they could care for people with dementia. I never saw Dave again, but his words still haunt me. Sometimes, in my worst nightmares, I can still hear the sound of his lawnmower getting closer. Last year, when I was 14 with just a week left of summer break, I was really looking forward to our yearly camping trip with my dad. It was a tradition we'd kept up since I was 7, a chance for us to bond before I got thrown back into the craziness of school. We usually hit up a campsite about 2 hours outside the city. This time was a little different, because we had Rex and Max along for the ride, the two Rottweilers Dad had rescued a couple months back. They were both big, built like tanks, and had that serious guard dog vibe. I wasn't totally sure they were cut out for it, but Dad said they needed some room to run wild and stretch their legs. When we turned onto the road heading to the park, I noticed it was weirdly empty. Normally around this time, the place would be packed with families, kids laughing, and the smell of barbecue everywhere. Looked like people just weren't feeling the whole camping thing this year. We didn't really care though. Dad said it'd be even better with more space to chill. Max and Rex were all hyped up to get out of the car. When we got to our usual spot, this flat patch of land next to a little stream, Rex and Max started sniffing around with their ears perked up, letting out little whines every now and then. We set up camp without saying much, the sun dropping fast and darkness settling over the woods. Dad got a fire going, and we roasted some sausages and potatoes for dinner. The air was getting pretty chilly, and I threw on a sweater, not feeling as comfy as I usually did on these trips. While we were packing up dinner, we heard this crackling noise coming from the edge of camp. Both dogs jumped up right away, their fur standing on end. Dad figured it was probably just a deer. He grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the noise, but all we could see were a bunch of tree trunks and bushes. Rex let out a low growl, and Max locked his eyes in the same direction, both of them looking ready for a fight. Then there was another crack, even closer this time. Dad grabbed my wrist and gave it a little squeeze to tell me to stay quiet. He moved the flashlight beam again, and this time I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving through the trees. Dad slowly reached for his belt where he always kept a utility knife. He called out, but there was no answer, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the fire crackling behind us. We stayed quiet for a few seconds, just staring toward where the noise had come from. Then they showed up. Two tall figures stepped out of the darkness. In the firelight, I could see their faces, both looking rough. One had a beard, and the other was bald. Both of them were holding sharp knives in a way that made my stomach drop. The bearded guy started cracking jokes, waving his knife toward our car and talking about how nice it looked and how much he liked all the stuff inside. Dad slowly pulled me behind him. He carefully reached into his pocket, pulled out the car keys, and tossed them onto the ground a few meters away from the guys. "We don't want any trouble. Take them if you want them," he said. And even though I could see his hands shaking, his voice still had this calm, steady edge to it. The bald guy sneered and said he wasn't just after the car, he wanted more. They started edging closer. I felt like I was frozen in place with fear. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. All the years we'd been camping, the worst thing we ever dealt with was maybe a bear sniffing around in the distance. Then everything flipped in a second. A loud bark tore through the air and Rex shot forward. I had no idea if Dad had given the command, or if Rex was just doing what came naturally. The bald guy stumbled back, but Rex lunged again like a rocket, locking onto the guy's wrist so hard that the knife clattered to the ground with a loud clang. His scream tore through the night, Rex's teeth sinking deep into his arm. At the same time, Max went straight for the other guy, slamming into him so hard he flew back and smacked into a nearby tree. Just like that, the whole situation flipped. The two guys shot each other a quick look, and you could see them trying to figure out what to do. The bearded guy muttered something that sounded like an order. They started backing off into the darkness, never taking their eyes off the dogs, who were still growling and ready to tear into them again if they made one wrong move. The bearded guy threw out some threat about coming back, but the way his voice shook made it pretty clear he wasn't feeling as tough as he sounded. Dad kept Rex and Max close for a few more minutes, standing real still and listening for any hint of movement. Once we were sure they were gone, we packed up fast. As soon as we were in the car, Dad fired up the engine and we tore out of there. We couldn't stop glancing out the back window, half expecting those two to come chasing after us. After about half an hour of driving, we pulled into a gas station. Dad went to call the cops while I stayed in the car with Max and Rex, still feeling jumpy about everything that had just gone down. The police showed up about 20 minutes later. They asked us how we got into the park and if we'd passed any barriers or warning signs. I thought back to the drive. There hadn't been any barriers, no signs. The next thing the cop said made Dad and me freeze. He told us the park had actually been shut down for the past 3 months. Nobody was supposed to be there. There'd been a murder, a family camping out had gotten attacked in the middle of the night, and nobody made it out. My stomach twisted up. The image of those 2 guys with knives still burned into my mind. The killers were still out there, and the case was still wide open. The autopsy report said the murder weapon had been a sharp kitchen knife. Thinking back, we'd missed a lot of red flags when we showed up at that campsite. There were no rangers around, no registration booth at the entrance. The campsites were completely empty, some of them so overgrown it looked like nobody had touched them in months, with weeds taking over the grills and picnic tables. And that bright red triangle sign covering up whatever was underneath. It had definitely been some kind of no entry warning, but those guys must have messed with it to set up their trap. I glanced over at Dad driving, but neither of us said anything about the signs. It was over, and the only thing that mattered was that we were still okay. We just sat there in silence the whole drive home. Rex and Max were sprawled out in the back seat, picking up on the heavy mood. I reached back and ran my hand over their fur, feeling this huge wave of gratitude for them being there when we needed them most. Three years have passed, but I still can't forget the face of the man in the black hoodie. Even though everyone says it was just a nightmare, I know what I saw on that security monitor that night was real. My name is Taylor. At the time, I was 16 years old and often took jobs house sitting and dog sitting for the Carson family. My dad was good friends with Mr. Carson, so I had been going to their house since I was a kid. The Carson family's mansion was in Jackson, Michigan. From the main gate to the house was a long driveway. The 2-story house had a classic Victorian architectural style, with 3 bedrooms and a spacious guest room. It took me over an hour to drive from my house to theirs. Around 9 p.m., I made some popcorn and watched a movie on Netflix. The 2 dogs lay quietly next to me, but I noticed they kept perking up their ears as if they were listening to something. I muted the TV to hear better, but there was nothing. After a while, I decided to go to bed. The guest room was on the 1st floor. The 2 dogs slept with me. They lay on a furry rug next to the bed. Around midnight, I was woken up by a jingling sound. I realized it was the dogs' collars. They were both sitting straight up, ears perked, eyes staring at the door with a very cautious look. I lay motionless, straining to listen. The house was still silent, with only the tick-tock of the clock in the hallway. Then I heard a humming sound, like the static you hear when a radio loses its signal. I remembered the baby monitor that Mrs. Carson kept in the corner of the hallway, directly across from my room. This system not only showed images from the camera placed in the main living room on the 1st floor, but could also be controlled remotely to turn lights on and off in different rooms. I tiptoed out of the bedroom. I approached the security monitor in the hallway. On the screen was a pitch-black image of the main living room. After fumbling for a bit, I found the button to turn on the main living room light. I hesitated for a moment, then pressed the button. A blinding light from the large chandelier lit up the entire living room on the monitor. And in that moment, I saw him. A young man, wearing a black hoodie, was hunched behind the sofa. He looked up at the ceiling where the camera was mounted, and I looked at him on the small screen. He jumped up and ran out of the camera's view. My body reacted before my mind could think. I ran back to the bedroom and locked the door tightly, quickly grabbing my essentials into my backpack. There was no time to think. I opened the bedroom window and climbed out. I could still hear the 2 dogs barking loudly inside the house. I ran as fast as I could toward my car, not daring to look back. As soon as I got into the driver's seat, I immediately locked all the doors, started the engine, and sped away. I tried to call the Carsons, but my call went straight to voicemail. When I got home, I sent a long text message explaining everything that had happened to both Mr. and Mrs. Carson. The next morning, mister. Carson called back. His voice sounded worried but also skeptical. Taylor, we're very worried about you. We drove home right after we got your message. We checked the whole house, from the basement to the attic, and there were no signs of a break-in. Nothing was missing either, except for the 2 dogs being locked in the living room. Mrs. Carson took the phone and said, "Our security system is very good. No one could have broken in." So, they didn't believe me. But I remembered every detail of what I had seen on that security monitor. From that day on, I refused all of the Carson family's offers for dog sitting. Even though many years have passed, I still can't forget the moment I saw his face on that security monitor. The Carson family's skepticism couldn't erase the image of the man in the black hoodie. What I went through that night still haunts me.
I had a cold-blooded killer as a roommate. I'm Terry, 31, and I work as an architect. My roommate is Richard. He works at the McDonald's nearby and he's the same age as me. We met during an interview for my current job. I got lucky and was chosen, but he wasn't. But Richard's current job is pretty good too. He's being considered for the store manager position. We've been living in this apartment for over a year, and everything's been going fine. We always keep things balanced, like moderate concern, moderate curiosity, and giving each other privacy and comfort. He's got a positive vibe that really helps him adapt well at work. I really admire his optimism. My job has set hours, but his doesn't. One day, I came home totally exhausted. When I saw the living room and the lights in Richard's room were on, I figured he'd gotten home. I called out a quick hello, which is our way of letting each other know we're home. After calling out twice, I didn't hear him respond. I gently pushed the door open, but he wasn't there. On the bed, though, was a huge bouquet of roses. The bathroom light was on, and I could hear the sound of running water. So he was probably taking a shower. Probably on a date with some girl, I laughed to myself and went back to the living room. Just thinking about what to have for dinner made me feel tired. I grabbed a snack and the TV remote, then flopped down on the sofa. Before I could even open the snack bag, I fell asleep after just a few minutes of watching my favorite movie. The loud scream from the TV woke me up with a jolt. I thought, why are the characters in this movie so weird? I glanced at my phone and saw it was almost 10 p.m. I started to panic a bit because I'd been asleep for nearly 4 hours. I opened the fridge to grab some food and found some bread, cheese, and cold cuts, enough to satisfy my hunger. I sat down to eat and started wondering how Richard's date went. After finishing my meal and cleaning up, I went back to my room. As I walked past Richard's room, I was surprised to still hear the sound of running water. Could this guy really have left the water running? I knocked on the door, but didn't get a response. The door was unlocked, so I pushed it open. The bathroom door was still closed, the light was still on inside, and the bouquet of roses was still on the bed. I turned the handle to open the bathroom door, but it was locked. I tried a few more times, but still couldn't get it open. I called out, feeling worried. Richard, are you in there?" All I heard in response was the sound of running water. Feeling anxious and confused, I started looking around his room. There was nothing unusual. His phone and wallet were still on the table. I was even more sure that he must be in the bathroom. He could have been in there for 4 hours or more. I screamed and banged on the door, calling his name. I tried to reassure myself that he might have just fallen asleep in there, but my fear grew as more negative thoughts piled up. He still didn't respond, so I ran to the sofa to grab my phone and call the police. The phone wouldn't recognize my face, and even after entering the password several times, it still didn't work. I was startled to realize that it was Richard's phone. I looked towards Richard's room door, thinking that since his phone was here, the phone in there must belong to... I flipped through the pile of pillows on the sofa to find my phone. After checking to be sure, I rushed out of the house. I asked the security guard to call the police. I stood under the building and kept praying for Richard. I looked up at the apartment window, and there was a dark figure standing there. It was Richard. I wasn't sure, but that figure looked really familiar. He stared at me, and I couldn't quite figure out what he was feeling at that moment. The police arrived quickly, and I told them I suspected my apartment had been broken into and that my roommate was in danger. I gave them the key code, and they entered the apartment. To my surprise, Richard, the person I reported to be in danger, was perfectly fine. He was just soaked and shivering. But when the police checked the bathroom in his room, they found the body of a girl in the bathtub, her neck tightly bound by a belt. He stayed calm and confessed to all his crimes without a hint of emotion. The unfortunate girl was his girlfriend, who had just accepted Richard's love the day before. That evening, he brought his girlfriend home and gave her a bouquet. But while his girlfriend was in the bathroom, Richard opened the door, walked in, and murdered her. He said he stayed in the bathroom, staring at his girlfriend's body for hours. He wanted his girlfriend to be his forever. I was stunned, looking at the friend I had always trusted and cared about. I couldn't help but wonder, what if his madness had turned toward me at that moment? I had no defenses and was even worried about a murderer.
I'm cleaning my new house with Buddy, my dog, just like any other day. My eyes happen to land on the wall calendar. July 4th, 2025 is fast approaching, and for a moment, a vague sense of dread rises within me, pulling me back to the memories of July 4th last year, a day I'll never forget. The evening of July 4th in Cedar Creek, Texas, always followed a familiar routine. Independence Day celebrations at the town park starting at 6 p.m., followed by fireworks at 8 p.m. I've lived in this small town for 10 years. Fireworks exploded in the sky like giant fiery flowers. I sat on a wooden bench near the playground, observing familiar faces in the sparkling light. Kids ran around with small flags in their hands. I still bring Buddy here every year. My buddy is so afraid of fireworks that every boom makes him jump and cower. But aside from the fireworks, he loves all the other activities. I stroked Buddy's head, trying to reassure him. It's okay, Buddy, just a little longer. But the fireworks had only just begun. The high school marching band had just finished their performance, a show filled with off-key trumpets and uneven steps. The tuba player was a big, heavy man in a dark red uniform. The uniform was soaking wet and too tight for his body. I remembered seeing him stumble and fall during the midday parade. The heavy tuba rolled down the street, and everyone around burst out laughing. I laughed too, and he looked directly at me at that moment. While watching the fireworks, I coincidentally saw him again. Even though we were dozens of yards apart, I still felt that cold, strange gaze. I looked at my watch. The fireworks were far from over, but Buddy couldn't take it anymore. We left the park and walked home. Most of the neighbors were still at the park. There was only the distant boom of fireworks and the click-clack of Buddy's paws on the sidewalk. As I was opening the gate, I heard steady footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw the tuba player walking toward me. He was still wearing the dark red uniform, his eyes fixed on me. He stopped in front of my gate. He didn't say anything, just stood there staring. Sweat still beaded on his forehead, even though the air had cooled. I nudged Buddy into the yard. He let out a low growl, the fur on his neck standing on end. 25 years. The man suddenly spoke, his voice hoarse. I tried to stay calm. Excuse me? 25 years I've played the tuba in this band. No one has ever dared to laugh at me. He stepped closer, his hand gripping the gate's iron bars. The streetlights illuminated his face, casting deep shadows under his eye sockets. I could clearly see every bead of sweat, every angry wrinkle. I'm sorry about earlier today. I didn't mean to. Do you know what it feels like to be laughed at by the whole town? He interrupted me, his voice trembling with anger. Do you know what it feels like when your life's passion becomes a joke? Buddy growled louder as the man raised his voice. I tightened my grip on Buddy's leash, unsure how to respond. He let go of the bars and stepped closer. I smelled sweat. He stared intensely at me. This day, next year, you'll understand that feeling. I turned and ran toward the house door. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, pushed Buddy inside, and slammed the door shut. The click of the lock made me feel a little safer. I turned off the lights inside the house and peeked through the curtain crack. The man was still standing there, facing my house. 10 minutes passed, and he was still there. Then he walked up onto the porch. The sound of his shoes on the wooden planks made my heart pound like a drum. Buddy hid under the coffee table, breathing heavily. I heard his footsteps moving around the house, from the front door, past the side windows, then to the backyard. He was checking all the entry points. Finally, he returned to the living room window. I saw his dark silhouette through the thin curtain. He pressed his face against the glass, his breath creating foggy circles on the window. I know you're in there. His voice was low, seeping through the glass like a sinister whisper. You can hide today, but next year, on this day. He paused, leaving a terrifying silence. You won't be able to hide anymore. I heard his footsteps descend from the porch. I waited another 10 minutes before daring to look outside. The street was empty. He had vanished, but on the window glass, faint traces of his breath lingered. I didn't dare turn off the lights all night. Buddy lay beside me on the sofa, his eyes alert, staring toward the door. The fireworks had long stopped, but their echo still lingered in my mind, along with his words. Soon after that incident, Buddy and I decided to leave town and find a new place to live. That's how we ended up in this house. I truly hoped never to see that man again, but his words still haunt me endlessly. Will he really come back? Or was it all just an empty threat?